Good morning and welcome to Daughters of Distinction. I am your host, Dr. Ernestine Brown, and today my guest is Dr. Nikita Garris Watkins. Welcome.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm well, and yourself?
Doing well,
Good.
thank
We're
you.
certainly glad to have you with us today. I'm excited that you're here. We had begun to read your book.
Yes, ma'am.
And I just got real excited about being with you this morning. And I know that you're going to be a blessing to our viewers. Dr. Nikita is the author of a book called Damaged but Destined. And I tell you, I started reading it this morning and I really couldn't put it down. The only reason I did put it down is because I had to get here.
Yes, ma'am.
There was so much in it. And
yes,
could you share with us what inspired you to write this book?
Writing the book was obedience to God. It was a 8-year battle. Did not want to tell my whole story. Didn't want my personal business to become public information. But God put a mandate on my life that there were lives that needed to know what had happened about possibility after destruction or efforts of the enemy to destroy you. It was inspired simply by time with God. Not to say others don't have stories, but his thing was that there were others who shared the same path. Mm-hmm. That's why the subtitle is So What, Now What? Because the question was, so what? Why tell my story? Why is it any different than anybody else? In my mind, there were others who had the journalistic abilities to effectively articulate themselves differently. But God said, I want you to tell the story of survival, the story of struggle, the story that you can turn from struggle to strength. And it was important to be able to show God in the midst of my story. And so that's how it became a book, literally after 8 years of saying no.
Wow, wow. Within your book, there are a lot of areas that I'm sure our viewers have experienced. I read in your book about early childhood molestation.
Yes,
I read about mental illness.
Yes, ma'am.
I read about rejection.
Mm-hmm.
I read about suicidal attempts.
Yes,
it was
ma'am.
a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot.
I read about marriages and relationships. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure those are all the things that the women of God or the people of God are still struggling and have been challenged with in life. Share a little bit about those areas which I just mentioned that brought you to the place.
Sure. My story is a story of molestation to ministry and all of the things that happen in between. When you talk about being molested at 6 years old, you talk about dealing with so many different spirits that awaken. Spirit of perversion, spirit of promiscuity, because now you're filtered off of a life that should not have been. At the same time, dealing with watching my mother go in and out of abusive relationships. And so now abuse becomes synonymous with love and having to detox, because becoming saved and everything didn't change when I got saved. It was still a process. And what I want people to take, one of the things I want people to take away from the book is that it is a process, that it doesn't change overnight. You're talking about the wheat and the tares of your life, the survival skills, the defense mechanisms we use just to keep our mind. It gives you access, or the enemy access to you on different levels. And it begins to control how you see everything, how you handle everything. I never thought, you talk about daddy damage, because in the book it talks about the fact that even at 43 years old, I still don't know who my biological father is. How that frames a female's or any child's mindset, because you're now talking about going from not knowing your father, or every male figure being a negative impact, and now you have to get to know God as Abba. That's a process. It doesn't happen because you're thinking, if this is my Abba, if this is my father, how can another father disappoint, another father let you down? You learn how to, the mindset, depression was a first-hand friend. I lived a life where I was a functional clinical depression. I was depressed at all times, but I had learned how to live in dysfunction, and identifying those ideas, identifying those mindsets that keep you hostage. Sometimes you don't even realize you're hostage until you see different or see better. I look at my mother and the mindsets and the things that she was dealing with and still struggles with, that she never got out of. And initially I hated her. I hated what she allowed to happen. I hated that she didn't protect. But as I grew in God, I began to understand she couldn't protect me because she couldn't protect herself. And no one had ever protected her. And so then you see generational curses and how they pass down generational behaviors that became, this person does this, and so I do it because that's what I saw. Learned behavior and having to unlearn everything you dealt with all of your life, only by the grace of God. And I recognize it's only because of God's grace, because there were others who went through the same things that I went through, faced the same things I faced, and didn't make it, didn't survive the attempts of suicide. Tried to take my life 4 times, didn't want to live because I felt like death would have been a release outside of what I was living, that death would have been literally a way of escape. I would find that even after being saved, I still wanted to die because I couldn't deal with the pain, the struggles that I had gone through. And so this book shows that journey. I would get married for the first time because I wanted that person to make me feel beautiful, to make me feel whole, because he was from a 2-parent family. He was the good guy, you know. And so I thought I could take some of his goodness and make me feel good. And what happened was I would find that the good guy had his own brokenness, and I had the good thing, but I didn't have the God thing. And not having the God thing became destructive. And so because I wasn't healed, I took into that relationship unrealistic expectations of a person to do for me what only God could do. And so here we are with years of brokenness, years of damage, and now I want God to come in and fix my mess that I made. Everything wasn't the enemy's fault. Some things were just bad choices, bad decisions, fix my flesh, make me feel good. And I had to go through a process of healing, a process of deliverance, a process of detox. And it was not an overnight situation. I am not anybody's overnight success. I am literally the byproduct of God's patience, the byproduct of God's grace and God's mercy.
Amen. That's great. And it's good to hear you say, because even it's a couple of things that come to mind as I was reading. Because one of the things we often say is, I'm glad you said that some things just was a matter of poor choices.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you talk a lot about the process of healing. And within that process of healing, what methods or what modalities did you employ to help you through that process? Because I know you said you came to God, you were saved, but at the same token, all your issues were still there.
Yes, ma'am.
So what was available to you as a result of coming to God? Are there any other external, I should say, resources that the church had, or that was put in place to help you on that journey? What did you utilize?
Those resources actually were not available to me, or I didn't realize they were available to me. I would, after getting saved 2 years later, literally have a mental breakdown and find myself in a mental hospital. So I actually was afforded, I can't say I was afforded access to a psychologist for a period, but that was only for a season. As a leader now, I am a strong advocate of the balance between spiritual and psychological interventions. I think that we've given people the wrong mindset that I just get up off the altar and everything is okay. It's still some things that have to be talked out, some things that have to be dealt with. I would find that I would have to deal with stuff because I didn't know that I had access, or I came from that background of what happens in this house stays in this house, or the unfortunate mindset that African Americans don't get counseling. Those things would have to be detoxed so that I would learn the importance of psychological intervention. I would have to learn the importance of talking things out, not internalizing things. My safe place, I have to admit, is God. My safe place is prayer. It is still my safe place because that is the place where I can call out, cry out, and literally be honest. We teach people that they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. I had to get to the place where I could give God my truths, whatever they were, good, bad, or indifferent. I had to be able to tell God, I'm hurting, I'm disappointed, I'm angry with you, God, I'm angry with people, I have unforgiveness. It wasn't until I could get to those truths that I actually began to be healed. Unfortunately, the first thing I was taught was church behavior and how to put on the church mask. I learned through relationship how to be able to go to God in my realness. And it was in those moments I would hear his voice. I would hear or read words that would both comfort me and correct me. A lot of people don't want to be corrected. I wanted comfort, but I knew I had to correct behaviors. Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. God would begin to show me how to do better, but I had to embrace the willingness to do better. It has to be changed. Deliverance is a decision. I don't care what we do at the altar, how anointed or how powerful we are. Deliverance is still a decision of the individual. And I got to a place where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I wanted better. I knew that better existed. I just had to figure out how to get there.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. A lot of times I think I can identify with a lot of your story because I've had my own life challenges.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think when we talk about getting to that place where we want to be delivered, where we want to be set free, where we want to have the pain stop.
Yes, ma'am.
And I also connect that piece with, did you recognize that there was something great within you as you went through this journey?
No, ma'am.
You couldn't see it?
I could not see it. It took me years to even consider that God had a plan for my life. I even talk about that process in the book. No, ma'am. I did not think that God had anything for me. I literally rejected the very concept of ministry. When it would first come up, that was not even a consideration. People would say to me, well, you have a call, and I would literally rebuke them. I've had to say some apologies to some people. I could not fathom that. I did not, first of all, I have to be honest, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't get saved until I was 13 years old.
Okay.
So I went to church with my grandmother, my foster grandmother, up until I was 3. I would not see the inside of the church for years. So there was no church, that whole concept. I had to learn church. I had to learn church protocols and behaviors, and so I got to know Christ first. And in getting to know Christ, it was in those moments that I began to get the call, and God had to do. It was the getting in of being called. I would fleece God over everything. Well, God, if you call me, then do this, and God, if you call me, then do that. And I didn't stop at 2 or 3. I had every year. I would be doing ministry and still saying, God, I don't think you called me to do this. Because I had to now deal with other issues and other spirits from my childhood, low self-esteem, fear. I was literally paralyzed by just what I thought, for me, the damage was what I thought would disqualify me. I would find out later there was a damage that qualified me to do ministry the way that God has me doing it.
Absolutely. It's interesting because even when I think a lot of times when people who have deeper life issues or challenging experiences in life, whether you are brought up in a church setting or not, there's a sense of greatness being in that individual, and that's why the opposition comes so strongly. I think the perseverance, because you had to be able to persevere up under the challenges of which you went through. One aspect of your book, you talk about your mother in that relationship. Tell me a little bit more about how that relationship is now.
What I've had to learn is how to evolve when things are not resolved, because that relationship still is not fixed. It is still an area that needs God's attention. It's not because of lack of forgiveness on my part. It's not because I don't love my mother, but unfortunately my mother is stuck. I pray for her. I pray that God will do the work. When I look at her, I see so much potential, and she's the being withheld from seeing her own potential because she didn't get delivered from the things she had gone through. So that relationship is still tender. It's still a place where I have to just trust God. It's still a place where my prayers go. I had to learn how to grow up almost without both a mother and a father. And so the absence of that, having me, she had me out of wedlock. She had me when she was 16, 17 years old. My mother didn't have a mother, and so she gave me the best she could. What I could say about my mother is I learned how to survive. I watched her survive. It may not have been the best sense of survival, may not have been the best example, but for years I said I did not want to be my mother. And so I lived my life trying not to be her. It was even the bad example that made me a better example. And while it's hard to say, or maybe even harsh, I took what she was doing and I did the opposite, which in essence saved my life. I was disconnected or removed from the house when I was 12 years old. So though that relationship changed, it evolved, I can say that we've had moments of encouragement and moments where this situation, I believe that she's stuck at the guilt of what she realizes has happened. I pray for her because that guilt, I want her to be free. But a person has to want to be free as well. So that's still its own level of burden. But I still learned so much from her. There are things I still took away from that. My mother, despite our poor background, there was this one thing she would always tell us: I'm not raising any average children. And so she had a mindset that we did not bring home anything less than a B. She didn't let us go outside and play. And so books became my best friends. And while she still tried to protect us as much as she could, not realizing that even though she protected us from playing, there was still a predator in the house. She didn't recognize the predators that were right there with us.
One of the things I noticed when I was reading the book is you made a statement, you just said it again, that you didn't want to be your mother.
Yes, ma'am.
You didn't want to be your mother, but at the same time,
I was becoming her.
You were becoming your mother. Yes, and how did you break that cycle? Once you recognized that you were becoming her, that things were being passed down, how did you rectify that cycle?
Aggressively and violently. I literally had to fight for the change. Change doesn't come easy. One of the things that is passed down in our family is a spirit of withdrawal. When we get angry, we withdraw from people. And it's actually a manipulative spirit in a sense, but we withdraw, we stop talking. We just don't talk to you, we don't deal with you. And so God would put me in situations where I would have to deal with people after the hurt or after the disagreement, after the fight. So every time, because I was saying, God, I loved you. When you have God in your life, when you're saying that the Holy Spirit is guiding you, it's not okay to do certain things. And so God will convict. He would chastise those whom he loves. And he would say, go back and make it right. He would make me have to deal with people where I knew that I hadn't done anything, in my opinion, or it wasn't my fault. And God would still say, go apologize and go make it. So it was literally, that's why I said it was such an aggressive, because God was like, I'm trying to get certain fruit out of you. I'm trying to get certain spirits out of you. And so circumstances and situations that I was placed in forced me to deal with me, forced me to deal with the irrational behaviors, forced me to deal with the responses. And God would say, it may not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility as a believer. That's a lot of weight, but we also know that we have a cloud of witnesses. And I wanted to make God look good. I wanted to make God proud.
That's great. That's great. Now, in the book, you speak about being a protector for your younger brothers and sisters,
yes,
particularly your sister, because you didn't want her to have to experience the things that happened to you by way of family, by way of stepfather. How was your relationship with your siblings?
The sister that you mentioned now is, when I think about family, I think think about her because that's the one. I see my other siblings, but not as much. But that particular sibling, I have the privilege of seeing on a regular basis. And when I think about family, she is synonymous with family. Actually, her daughter's here with me today. And so that is the closest relationship. From the time she was born, I remember when I was 6 years old, and I remember running home from school and going to see her in the bassinet. And there was just this instant protective feeling, never wanting her to experience what I experienced. The hardest part about everything I went through was when I was snatched from my siblings and didn't see them for years. I still see the other ones, just not as frequently. I still pray for them. My heart is still for my siblings. I remember wanting to, at a season in my life, I wanted to take them and raise them myself. I asked my mother for my siblings because I wanted to take them out of certain environments because that's how much I love them. I will always love them. They're my siblings, but they're like my children at times. And they're grown, they have their own children, but there's just a special heart. There's still that big sister protection mode that stays in my heart.
Great. And God sent some other, I'll call them rescuers along the way.
Yes, ma'am.
For you, there were some extended family members. I can't recall her name. I know she had a daughter by the name of Sally, did she?
Well, in the book, we changed names to protect. To protect it, not so innocent.
Grandmother.
My grandmother, Florence Green. She's named specifically. She's actually my foster grandmother.
Okay.
When my mother was in school, her best friend, she would go to this house, go to this family, and they're a wonderful family. So she fell in love with them. When she became pregnant with me, they actually took her in, which it just exemplifies who my grandmother is. She's still alive now. So because God is so strategic and so loving and so gracious, he puts people in our path that exemplify his love. When I first learned about love, I learned it from her. And I'm not talking about just the love of convenience, but I'm talking about agape love. That has been the agape, my constant. Even when I was not lovable, she loved me. I learned faith from her. Today I can call her and she'll say, I opened up the door and I just thank God for the day. And I open up the door, and even if it's raining, I thank God just for being able to see. And I've seen her go through so many different things, but her faith has been unwavering. And so when I think about faith warriors, that's who I learned faith from. Strategically, others would show up in my life. Even when my life was shifting, God has a way of putting people in your place or in your path. And in this season of my life, it's my ministry family. My ministry family has become my family. And so when I think about those I love and those I protect and those I appreciate, my ministry family is my family. I have my own children. I have 2 of my womb and 2 of my heart. And my husband is phenomenal.
Great.
That is he was my first example of true protection, is my husband.
Amen. And the healing process, it has brought you to this place. So, what one message would you want your book to speak clearly to those who have gone through some of the same? Because you say the subtitle
is "So What, Now What?"
So what? Now what? Now what?
Now what? And that's what I want people to talk about is so what, not so what from a sarcastic perspective, so what from the understanding that you can't change what has happened, but we have, no matter what has happened, we have the power to change what happens next. And so it's a now what that I want them to think about. What do they want? And are they willing to work for it? Wanting it is not enough. Working for it, you have to do. But it's with the grace of God and the strength of God that you can have strength after struggle. There is strength after abuse. There is destiny after damage. There may be scars, but my scars are testimony to what I survived. It's the now what. What do you want? And are you willing to allow God to take you through the process to get it? It doesn't discount. It doesn't take away from what happened. But in order to have real power, you have to literally take the power out of the enemy's hands. As long as you're still replaying it, as long as you're still using it as a story of pity, you're not at the place of power. I want people to be empowered by their pain. And it sounds like an oxymoron, but literally your pain can become your power. And if you use that to bless somebody else, it's a mighty, mighty thing.
That's great. I always say that you have to expose it. And once you expose it, it doesn't have the power over you anymore. It doesn't have that same grip
That's right.
that it may have had in the past. It allows you to walk in a certain level of freedom and liberation.
Absolutely.
And I discern that that's what it has done for you.
Oh, yeah.
You said it took you 8 years to get it down, but I can imagine that once you begin to write it and get it out there, that it just gave you another level of freedom beyond what we could probably even understand or imagine. I think it's a great book. I think it's going to help a whole lot of people, because I think that one of the things that happens is when we do go to the church, we do learn how to put that mask on.
Yes.
And I think a lot of problems that we have and that we see within the church community is people who haven't healed.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Absolutely.
people who are hiding their true stories. So we do need people who are not afraid to just show who they really are, and show and share what happened to them, in hopes of bringing someone else to a place of freedom. Do you see yourself writing even more?
Yeah, I do. I did not initially think I would, but even before the year is out, there will be one more book that'll come out this year. Once I get the feedback, I'll have what's called the Deliverance Diary, and so it'll take them through the Proverbs as a daily deliverance process. From there will be the study guide to Damaged but Destined. What I'm waiting for is the feedback from the readers, because it'll tell me what they're looking for, what they need, and I'll do the study guide. Next year, my husband and I are going to come out with a book called Second Time Around, which will talk about healing after divorce and remarriage and the process.
That's great.
So
there's a workbook that's coming along
with the book. Yes, ma'am.
with the books. That's great. Sometimes people need that will help a lot, to have a process of going through healing that complements the book. Again, the name of the book is Damaged
But Destined.
but Destined.
Yes, ma'am. On my shirt.
Beautiful shirt.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
shirt. And we thank you, Dr. Nikita, for being with us. We thank you. Tell the people where they can purchase your book.
Well, it would be an honor. If you want a signed copy, you can get it at www.damagedbutdestined.com. Once you purchase the book, I'll sign it and I'll ship it to you directly. Or if you want the e-copy, it is available on Amazon. Feel free to download it, send me your reviews. Inbox me, let me know what you think. Tell me the questions that you have so that I can prepare the study guide. But again, it's www.damagedbutdestined.com.
Thank you.
Yes.
We thank you for listening to today's topic. Thank you from Daughters of Distinction.